Hello there, GCSEers. Now, we've been looking at crime and why we punish people, and we particularly looked at the death penalty in the last unit. And now we're going to go on to looking at a particular crime that's quite associated with young people, but doesn't have to be, and that's drugs. Now, you've been doing a lot of drugs in your PSHE sessions this year, and actually what that means. And I'm going to leave a little bit of that actually to what it is that you do there, things like how drugs affect you and different types of drugs. And we're going to look at that in a little bit of detail in this video, but mostly it's going to be about what are drugs, different types of drugs, and moving on then in the next sections to look at how religious believers think that drugs should be treated and looking at some evidence for that. Now, drugs, what are they? And the key thing is, what do you know about them? Now, we are all human beings, and we all produce drugs all the time within our bodies. That's why when we take a drug into our body, it affects us so much. And here you can see a picture of the different organs of our body, or the different areas of our body that produce different drugs. And that's happening all the time. It happens throughout the day when certain things happen to us, when we go through certain experiences. For example, think about a roller coaster that you've been on. When was the last time that you actually went on a roller coaster? Now, as you're going through the process, you're walking up to it, your heart starts beating faster, and you're just about ready to get on it. And then when you actually get on it, it's amazing, when you go through the different ups and downs and things like that. And the reason for that is you can see here our body again, and the reason for that is that our adrenal glands are producing something called adrenaline. And adrenaline is a drug. And often people will get adrenaline when they need particular things happening. You can have adrenaline injected into you if you need it for more. But a lot of people are what's called adrenaline junkies. They want that rush. They want that adrenaline. So that's why we go on roller coasters. Why roller coasters are so good, are so nice. Not necessarily nice, but give us that excited feeling. That's what we want. Now, obviously, drugs that we put into our body are slightly different, and there's three main types of drugs, three main areas of what drugs are. The first one is medical drugs. Okay, we all know about medical drugs and the drugs that we get from a pharmacist or things like that, and some can be prescriptions, some we can get just over the counter, and they all do different things to us. And we're going to look at the pros and cons of them in a minute, but there you can see paracetamols or various different drugs that you might know about. Legal drugs, okay, drugs that are legal but still affect us. Here you can see someone drinking alcohol. Alcohol's a drug, or someone smoking there. They're smoking nicotine. Nicotine being the drug there that we have. So those are legal drugs. And finally, the ones that I'm sure are aware of are the illegal drugs. Now you can see some pictures there with different types of illegal drugs. You can see cannabis there, ecstasy, you can see heroin, and you can see cocaine. So different types of drugs there that are actually illegal to use and illegal to buy and sell in this country. Now let's have a look at the pros and cons of each one. So we're going to start off with medical drugs. Okay. Now the key thing about them is that I'm sure, have all taken medical drugs, whether that's Calpol when we were little for paracetamol, or other things there. They're there to help us, really, to relieve pain and suffering, and possibly even to cure disease, to actually cure what's going on in our lives and problems that we have. There's anti-cancer drugs, there's lots of different diseases drugs, so they are a good thing. However, there is some negatives. They can be addictive. Some people can get very addicted to prescription drugs or medical drugs. They can also, people can become reliant on them. Things like painkillers and paracetamol, they can become so dangerous that if we take too much of them, we can overdose, and it could actually kill us. They can get into the wrong people's hands. If, for example, you've got prescription drugs there, you can see some people get them and then they sell them on as if they were actually illegal drugs. And, I've left that last one there. They can be tempting to children. Most people actually lock their medicines away in a medical cabinet, so that actually doesn't happen. Now, legal drugs, or social drugs, as we have here, right, I've included the cigarettes and alcohol picture there, but also you've got there a picture of coffee, caffeine. Okay, now caffeine is a drug. What caffeine does is it makes your heart beat faster and makes you actually less susceptible to things like sleep. Okay, so positives are we can have a choice. We can take them. They're not illegal, so people can actually choose to take them. And some people actually say they provide a stress relief. I remember my dad smoked, and he always used to say, the reason why was because he had quite a stressful job and all that kind of thing, and it provided him with some relief. And also, legal drugs or social drugs can provide some income for the country. We get taxes from them, and they can actually provide something good for the country. However, there is a negative, and that's also that they can provide social issues. Now, I'm sure you've all seen on television, if you haven't seen in real life, is the problems that drugs like alcohol in particular can cause. They cause people to maybe react differently in a social situation than they would do normally. And this can often cause fights or people just not acting in a way that they would want to. Now, you also get very addicted to these drugs. I think the NHS, especially cigarettes and alcohol, but even caffeine, cigarettes and alcohol, people get so addicted to them. They cost the country so much in the NHS. They provide, you can see there the health warnings for the NHS. Now, the key thing is they provide a lot of taxes as well. So the NHS and the problems that they provide for that, it's quite, people some say they often offset it. And the final one, what do illegal drugs do? Now, I'm going to leave this up for a minute and talk to you just very, very briefly about it. You can obviously know you can get different classes of drugs because they affect people in different ways. Now, the illegal drugs I know you deal with in the PSHE session that you do in Year 9. You also deal with cigarettes and alcohol. But just have a quick look here at this actual slide about what it is that actual people do. So, things like Class C drugs, what you get for possession and what you get for dealing them. I'm not too worried about that because most people don't get those actual sentences, not unless they do drugs quite frequently. But the severity, so if you're dealing with a Class A drug, it's obviously going to be a severe penalty and a different kind of drug from a Class C drug. And you can see there things like anabolic steroids, tranquilizers, you get cannabis in Class B, and then you get ecstasy, heroin, cocaine in Class A. And what those do, you're going to learn in your PSHE session. Now, this one's a key one. Why people do or don't do drugs. Okay. Now, here we can see the arguments for doing drugs, and against the other side of it. Now, this could be social, or this could be actually illegal drugs. So people claim it's for boredom. It's my body, my freedom. They can do what they want. Some people argue that legalizing drugs may be good for society. If you actually had control of drugs, you could control them. You could make sure that they're good for people rather than having lots of wrong things in them. So therefore, you can actually control what happens. However, the key thing is if there was no drugs there, then there wouldn't be any supply, so people could stop doing them. So that's an argument against them. And these are the key ones really we're going to look at in a second, really. The public effects, how severely drugs can cause problems for people, stealing, finding money for drugs, and ultimately if people take an overdose, death can actually kill you. And they don't provide any help for society. They don't actually advance people's idea of what it is that we can do for society. It causes a problem. And this is where we get to this one here in particular, addiction. If people get addicted to drugs, then they'll go to any means to actually get control and get, to have that drug. This is true of both illegal drugs and legal drugs. People who are addicted to alcohol, not necessarily nicotine so much, but even that, possibly with the rising price of cigarettes, but especially for illegal drugs, is that it causes so much anxiety, so many problems within a family, within society, that people have to get help and things like that. We're going to look at that later on. We're going to look at an organisation called Battelle of Britain and how people can actually become rehabilitated into society, and the key word there that we've looked at. So the key question is for this unit is, most people take drugs because they're bored. Now, is that the case? Do you think maybe because they're addicted to them and people just get out of control with drugs? Well, the key question is, ladies and gentlemen, what do you think?